What's up, everybody? Kramzer here with Jason and Joe, and it is Lenny Kravitz week here on the channel. So this is round 3 of a 3-week plan of us each picking an artist we wanted to do, and I've picked Lenny Kravitz. And the main reason I picked Lenny Kravitz is he's an artist that I decided I liked a lot more of than I realized through the Album of the Year series. What can you say about Lenny Kravitz? Came on the scene in the late 80s, has a pretty unique sound, while everyone else that was kind of saying negative things and getting a new movement against hair metal and all the 80s pop with grunge and all that. He kind of stood out as doing, some guitar stuff, but doing it quite different. Plays the instruments on all of his albums. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. Huge in France. Good following here in the States and the UK, but they just love him in France because, sunglasses and scarves and cool clothes. He's one of the best looking dudes of all time. There's no doubt about that. A very interesting career, not always a critic darling. I don't think that his stuff that makes the radio, especially after Are You Gonna Go My Way, is a good representation of him as a whole. But I really wanted to get into this when Strut came out. Last decade, I listened to it and then made like a nice Lenny Kravitz playlist. But honestly, going into this, I knew the first 3 albums and the one from 98, because that was just huge when I was like 12 with Fly Away and American Woman and stuff. I believe we had that in the house. And then Strut. So he's got 11. I knew 5 going into Albums of the Year when I was like re-looking at Circus and Lenny and all that stuff. And I thought that I liked him a lot more. I'm not saying all of his albums are perfect, as we will get into very soon, but I thought it would be a really cool listography to do, get some good exposure to someone that I want to know more. And we don't really talk about Lenny Kravitz too much on the channel, so here it is. What do you guys think going in?
Well, I mostly know Lenny for the hits, the radio stuff. He was a constant presence on the radio throughout his career. Even, a lot of these artists sort of have their moment in the sun and they kind of disappear, but he's been pretty consistent all the way through the 90s, even through the 2000s. You'd hear his stuff on the radio. I don't know if I ever listened to a whole album of his before doing the Album of the Year series. Listened to a couple during that. Didn't really know what to expect from him because his singles kind of are all over the place. So this was an interesting one, to say the least.
I was a pretty big Lenny Kravitz fan at one point, and I owned all of them up through Black and White America. And I have heard all of them, but Strut and Raise Vibration, the last 2, were probably one-time listens for me when they came out. And going into this, I didn't really remember them much at all, even though they're not that old. 9 of them I knew well, and I had them on CD, and the last 2 just very vaguely remember listening to them, but don't know much about them.
Okay, well, I don't know what to expect from you guys. I can't tell if you're misleading me in our personal texts about really not digging this, but I'm expecting some lousy reviews for a good part of it, which I'm probably going to share because I think there are very distinct eras of quality. And for me, it kind of runs the gambit from star ratings from worst to best, pretty big. So, Joe, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I'm going to go at the bottom. I got Circus. This is from 95. This is kind of his, I don't know what he was really trying to do. Maybe a little more rock and roll on this. But I think it's pretty lousy. It just seems like every sort of like vaguely 70s rock and roll pastiche with very bad lyrics. I gotta say, I think he's a really awful lyricist. pretty much throughout his whole career, and he never really changes. It's very like hippy dippy, love power, awkward, kind of like not sexual, like lyrics that he's trying to be like sexy about, but they're like really forced and bad. So this one just had nothing interesting about it at all. Like I just don't know what he's going with. It's not hard enough rocking. There's not enough edge. There's no grit, and just nothing memorable. So I got it at 2 stars. Just very like basic, and he really kind of was getting further and further away from the sound of his that I liked on the earlier records. I think he had at least an interesting sound. On this, it's just very formulaic and generic.
All right. I don't think that's one of his more like highly regarded records, but it's surprising, I think, to see it all the way at the bottom. Lenny Kravitz is kind of known for having like this amalgamation of sounds from the past. Classic rock, like Jimi Hendrix and stuff, is in his sound, but there's also a lot of R&B and funk. And occasionally he has a couple records scattered throughout his career where he really emphasizes that side of his sound, the R&B and the funk. And the one I have at the bottom is one of those. Black and White America from 2011. There's a reason this is the last one I bought. I think he does the R&B and funk thing much, much better on other albums. I think he's trying to do something like socially conscious and meaningful here and just falls flat on his face. All the lyrics, like Joe said, on this record are really bad, really corny. And I don't think he really says much on the issues that he's addressing outside of like really empty platitudes. The sequencing on this is weird. It's super long, 16 tracks. There's no continuity to it. I just think the songwriting is not good on this at all. There's a really bad guest appearance from Drake. There's a really bad song with Jay-Z. Really nothing on this works that well. I have this at 1.5 stars. I think it's a very bad album.
Fair. Yeah, Joe said something that's going to be talked about throughout. He has a lot of bad lyrics. His best lyrics are when he just kind of does like hard rock cliches, and at best they're usually just fine. So yeah, lyrics are never going to be the strong suit here. And yeah, the image of like the flower power, but also like wealthy and just world conscious. Let's all hold our hands around the equator and make a happiness belt around the planet, and just pretty pretentious at times. A lot of his sentiments are good, but yeah, the lyrics don't always deliver. My number 11 is going to be Baptism. I've got it at 2 stars. I think Minister of Rock and Roll is a pretty good opener. I think at times he can be a pretty good singer. Sometimes he does these really annoying enunciations and pronouncing of words. On the song I Don't Want to Be a Star, he does that really lame, whiny, like he's almost like a teenage girl that doesn't like refined how to sing. He's like, I want to be a star. It's pretty bad, not very good. I think Lady is annoying. Calling All Angels is pretty boring. California is cool, a nice song about moving to California and like hearing records he's never heard, which I think is kind of ironic because he mentions the Stones and the Beatles. Flash has some absolutely cringeworthy, self-indulgent lyrics about his own celebrity. Yeah, and overall, there's some good horn sections and spots on this, but it's pretty bland all over the place. So Baptism, number 11, 2 stars for me.
All right, I'm surprised. I guess I'm not surprised at Jason's pick, but Circus and Baptism are generally regarded as his worst albums, just so we know. In 5, nobody liked that one as well. For me, my number 10 is going to be It's Time for a Love Revolution, which just straight off the bat, like you're just totally rehashing exactly what he did on his first 2 albums. These songs are all just poor imitations of those. There's nothing interesting on this one. It's competently played and competently arranged. Lyrics, again, terrible. Good Morning has some really cringy, awkward lyrics. And there's no single or anything on this. Like most of his albums throughout his career at least had a couple good singles on them that you could latch onto. This one, I actually forgot to listen to it the first time through. It just didn't even show up. So I listened to it and I was like, well, I didn't miss anything. It's just the same stuff. I will say the bass work on his albums, quite excellent throughout. And I do like the guitar tone on this one. Like he crunched it up a little bit, a little more aggressive, which I liked. Because I feel like, people say, oh yeah, Hendrix and stuff, but he rarely ever approaches that level of, guitar pyrotechnics or anything about Jimi Hendrix. So that's, a little disappointing. I thought there'd be a little more Hendrix on some of these albums, but there's not at all. This is a 2-star album for me.
All right, we're talking about a lot of different albums out of the gate here. My number 10 is the most recent, Raise Vibration. This one is just in one ear and out the other for me. I don't have a ton to say about it. The songwriting on it ranges from completely unremarkable to completely terrible. The song Johnny Cash, the lyric, hold me like Johnny Cash when my mother died, whisper in my ear like June Carter. If that's a metaphor, what does that mean? And if that's literal and that actually happened, like no one can relate to that. It's just a very, very weird song. But yeah, this is a 1.5 also.
I've got literally the same thing. Raise Vibration at 2 stars, my number 10. That Johnny Cash lyric, I Googled it. I was like, Johnny Cash, mother whisper, what am I? Is there some sort of story from the history of Johnny Cash knowing Lenny Kravitz? It's so bizarre. Is it a dream he had? It's really out of left field. The only song on here I kind of like is Low. It's really calm, cool atmosphere to it. Pretty hysterical the way he's doing the enunciation, pronouncing of the lyrics, and We Can Get It All Together. Yeah, this one is just like Jason said, in one ear, out the other. 2 stars. It's kind of all over the place. He's not going all in on the funk. There's a little more modern production of it, but I just don't know what he's going for here. He pretty much, throughout all of these, I disagree with Joe. I think the guitar work when it's on is really killer. It's not going to be, it's Hendrix more in just the sort of acidicness of it. It's not going to sound like Hendrix. But I love a lot of the guitar on here. You don't get any of that really on Raise Vibration. He pretty much, even though he's great when he's on, of fusing a lot of those different sounds, like with his idea of retro rock, with the funk, and there can be even some disco bass at times. But he only writes 3 kind of songs. He writes the straight up funk, Sly and the Family Stone kind of remakes, hard rockers, and then what I can only call the slow Lenny Kravitz ballad jam, which he kind of just redoes and recycles. But weirdly, none of that is on Raise Vibration. It's just a really weird blended smoothie of just his holes and gaps. So yeah, 2 stars for Raise Vibration. Johnny Cash lyrics, absolutely hilarious. But that's what I've got number 10.
I wish I had been listening to the lyrics at that point, because it sounds hilarious. I completely, blocked anything he's saying out at that point with the 11th album. But I kind of do like Johnny Cash as a song. I think it's one of his more interesting songs, at least of his late period. But we'll get to that a little later. Not quite there yet. We got to mention that Kramzer did have this in his top 5 in 2014. I got Strut. I'll bump it up to 2.5 stars, though. There's just no growth here. We're 9 albums in, and it's just the same kind of thing. There's no growth in songwriting. His lyrics still just horribly awkward. I think this might be his worst lyric album of all. Dirty White Boots, one of the worst songs I've ever heard. Pull your knickers down and show me that treasure, he sings. Just horrible, just horrible. I mean, he's obviously been listening to a lot of Bruno Mars on this, and he can't pull it off. He just can't. He needs to go back to his retro rock and not kind of try and cop the pop sounds. And I think musically it's okay. The chamber is kind of cool. Bad lyrics, but it has an interesting sound. Definitely get that 70s retro to it. Something like Sex has a great guitar line, but the lyrics and the vocal work itself just totally kill it. I'm a Believer and Happy Birthday, terrible. And I think his vocal delivery on this whole album is just like real weird. Like it's forced in like weird manners. Like he's purposely trying to change it up a little bit. He like enunciates and holds like all the wrong like lyrics, and it just makes the whole thing awkward. I think the instrumental work on this album's pretty good. It's better than maybe, I don't know, maybe not. It all kind of ran together at this point in 2014, and this one just doesn't do enough to sort of zap me out of my Lenny Kravitz malaise that I had gotten into.
Yeah, sorry, Cram. It's also my number 9. So, like I said, this was one of the ones that I didn't remember really what it sounded like going into it. You had it in your top 5, so I was kind of intrigued by that. Started it off, and I think it starts out great. Sex and Chamber are excellent songs, I think. They have like this synth pop, like 80s sound mixed with like late 70s disco, real glitzy. But there's also like this like Scary Monsters era guitar sound from Bowie all over those tracks. It's really cool. It's a different sound that he's never done before in his career. And it kind of matches the image on the cover. So I was like, oh man, we've got a cool new direction, a new sound for Lenny. And then the next track is Dirty White Boots, I think. And I'm like, okay, all right, this one's a misstep, but we'll get back on track. And it just turns into like a 15 car pileup instead of like, it's just like one terrible song after another. I think you got Frankenstein, She's a Beast, I'm a Believer, and Happy Birthday all in a row. I think they're his 4 worst songs in his whole catalog. Just absolutely terrible. It closes with a cover of Ooh Baby Baby that is nothing special. I don't know. It's had so much promise at the start. I think it made your top 5 just off of those 2 songs, because I can't imagine you really liking all of those other ones. That's a 1.5 stars for me.
I love She's a Beast. I mean, I absolutely love it.
I was about to mention that. I forgot to say how much I hated that song and the lyrics on that one. Just so, like those metaphors and stuff, not even metaphors, like it's not even deep enough for metaphors. Those descriptions, like she's a beast, just horrendous. Just, ugh.
It's kind of I like it because it's so uniformly just like kind of embracing his own like douchiness at times. Like he's just going all in and having fun with it. Kind of reminds me of some of the really awkward, overly sensual lyrics that like the Rolling Stones did in the late 80s. Like you've got that one song, Terrifying, when he's like, I'm horny as a hog, I'm slippery as a snake, I'm dirty as a dog, I'm stronger than an ox. It's just like, all right, yeah, just go for it. I think he a lot of times try to be too cute with his lyrics, but yeah, we'll talk about Strut much later because it is in my top 5 for 2014. Number 9, I've got Black and White America, going 2.5 stars. I'm with Jason. Nice sentiment. Lyrics not very tactfully done here. A lot less guitar. It's more of got that sensual funk feel. His grand view of black and white harmony and his sort of adult contemporary sex symbol status and soulful new age flower power kind of way kind of makes it the most Lenny Kravitz record that he's got. But I think it's a little tone deaf at times, and just like the way he's conveying these messages, pretty bad. At this point in the discography, after a rough 2000s, I'm really looking for something like Joe was saying, like there's a stretch where he's putting out albums that don't really have a killer track or a good single on it, and I'm looking for it here. I think I get it with Stand, so that gets it up from 2 to 2.5. I think Stand is a pretty good song. I like the joyousness of it. He had a little bit of rap segment on the last album, but I kind of like the one with Jay-Z and DJ Military, who I don't know who that is. I like a lot of his singing on here. I think he's being a little safer with his mechanics and just like a cleaner, easier sound. I think you can get that on Rockstar Life. Super Love is okay. A lot of these albums are just way too long. Favorite song on the album is I Can't Be Without You a lot, mainly just because it kind of lifts Ashes to Ashes from Bowie almost, bar for bar. But like with how long the track listing is, like why wasn't anyone just like, you don't have to put all of these songs on every album. I feel like someone needed to be in there like Molly Ringwald and Breakfast Club, just like, stop putting these on the album. It's 16, 14, 15 songs. Faith of the Child, not very good songwriting. It's like a song for like liberal suburban soccer moms that think he's really hot and also listen to Train. That's about it. Yeah, I'm not crazy about Drake on Sunflower, but I think there are pieces of good stuff here, but overall 2.5, it leaves kind of a bad taste in your mouth.
Because I'm the only fan of Black and White in America here. We'll get to that later. I got it, my number 8. Lenny. I don't know, there's like a little bit of neo soul going on in Believe in Me. A little less rock than on 5. A lot of crooning, a lot of vamping. Pay to Play, Battlefield of Love, kind of standard rock songs. This is sort of his radio-friendly area, so he always has a couple good singles. Dig In, good retro-sounding one from him on here. But other than that, I just don't remember this one at all. There's nothing that really stood out. And it's a competent rock record that he sort of just started churning out, but there's just nothing in here that really just makes me want to go back and listen to this ever again. So I got it at 2.5 stars, and it's just, anonymous mostly.
My number 8 is Baptism. I think this is a pretty clear step down from Lenny, which I think is quite good. But I don't think this record is as bad as its reputation. I've seen this on like lists of the worst albums of all time, and I don't think it's nearly that bad. But I think on this record, maybe like the first time where he's not only like borrowing or aping from the past, but he's like aping from himself, aping from the past. So it's like extra repetitive. I think there's some nice hooks on this record. The production is passable, it's fine. California's cool, like Kram said. I think Where Are We Running is a good song. I remember liking that a lot, that song, when it came out, and then seeing all the horrible reviews for this record and not really understanding. But it's fine. It's nothing special, but it's definitely a step up from the 3 I had below it. And so I have it at 2.5.
All right, my number 8 is gonna be Is It Time for a Love Revolution? Still at 2.5 stars. I've got, I don't know, kind of the same criticisms about it as everything kind of around this time. Mainly, like Joe keeps saying, is there's not anything that stand out, nothing that would make like a playlist. Well, I guess there's a little bit more. I do like the first 2 tracks, hoping for something a little different. But you kind of get the same old Lenny, but there is some really nice, sweet, acidic guitar wailing on the opener and then on Bring It On. So I'm like, all right, if this is just going to be just kind of the same old pop rock songs with wailing guitar, it might be pretty good. But then he does just some of the clunky slow jams that, once he did Again in like 2000 or whatever, that single, I feel like he was like, well, I'm going to do this 3 times again on every single album I do. Just got that slow like beat, and I think Love, Love, Love is okay. Everything right now just kind of feels like he's just underperforming. Like he's really complacent with what he is, and he's not pushing himself as an artist at all. He's bored. He's not challenging himself. And like, back in Vietnam, kind of like the Johnny Cash song, it's like, I'm assuming it's, a comparison to the Middle East, but like, what are you saying about it other than I see parallels with Vietnam and Iraq, so that's going to be the song? But what else is it? What else? Like, are you mocking it? Are you like, I'm sure you're against it, but like, what are you really saying? And it's very lazy at times. 2.5 stars. Number 8, Is It Time for a Love Revolution? And I can just picture him just like saying that, like with his sunglasses, and like the new album's called Is It Time for a Love Revolution? Something we should probably think about. So I don't know. I can make fun of him, but like if he walked in here right now, I'd be like, oh my God, Lenny.
I'd tell him straight to his face, I don't like him. I don't like him one bit. No.
You're a 3.5 star guy though.
I'm a 3.5 star guy, but he's underperforming even my most basic 3.5 star ratings. I have a feeling both of you will have this in the top three. I think it stinks. No, it's just very mediocre. This is his most mediocre, most disappointing record. It might be higher than this, like on just like base for base merits. But I got Are You Gonna Go My Way at number 7.
Before you get into this, your status as the rocker of the group is now gone. If you've got
Please.
Black and White in America over this,
There's so little rock and roll on this. It's kind of embarrassing, especially after the title track is over. The one time in his entire career you could say he's channeling Jimi Hendrix a little bit, but even that, like, it's not a great like rock song. It's very repetitive. It's kind of boring. Like it's good. Like it's on my top 10 list because I really couldn't find other songs to put in there. You get past the title track, you get something like Believe, which basically reminds me of like a Backstreet Boys song. Like it's so soft and like no grit, no bite, just very simplistic guitar work all over this, very uninteresting. I think his phrasing on guitar is terrible. I think it's basically like this very most standard blues, like licks and riffs, and like he never grows out of that. And it's very disappointing because I was hoping at least at some point, like he gets some kind of interesting guitar sound. He never does at all. And I think this one, he's just trying like so hard to be like something beyond what the template he established on his first two albums, which, you know, a nice kind of blending of funk and R&B and, you know, a lot of Prince influence. On this, he tries to, you know, spread his wings and break out of that sort of, you know, pigeonholed, you know, what the critics kind of thought he was. And there's no growth. Like there's nothing on here that says that he can break free. Like he's a great instrumentalist. He plays all the instruments on his first couple albums, but he's just not an interesting instrumentalist. Like he just never builds off the promise that he showed. And I think on this one, he just kind of falls on his face and has nothing interesting to say at all.
You're not wrong that he never built off the promise he showed, but this was the promise he showed.
Like, yeah, this is him falling off the ledge.
That's crazy. That's right up there with your Remain in Light ranking.
What? Do people really don't think this is a great album? It doesn't have like great reviews. Like, well, this is not even close to Remain in Light. Like everyone thinks that's a 5-star record. Everyone thinks this is like 3.5 stars.
But when you're talking about Lenny Kravitz comparatively to his other records, that's insane.
This one it bored me. It bored me to tears. 2.5 stars.
All right. Wow. We haven't had a disagreement like this in a while.
I told you guys this is going to be a fun one.
Getting your claws out here. Pretty cool.
All right. Well, my number 7, I have It Is Time for a Love Revolution, which I think after Baptism was pretty much uniformly panned across the board by critics. He kind of just retreated to what he was doing earlier in his career. I think this was the safe move for him. I think this was an attempt to get back to his classic sound. And at the time, it got great reviews. There were reviews that said this was his best record, which I think is completely crazy. And at the time, I remember being very underwhelmed by it. Wasn't a huge fan of it. Coming back to it now, though, I think musically there's a lot more here than I realized. I think the guitar solo on Bring It On is great. The very Beatle-esque Good Morning is, I think, a really good song. But it's still like that whole love, revolution, flower power themes that he's dealing with feel super heavy-handed on this record, really forced, and it's still way too long, 66 minutes. So far from a perfect album, and it's not an amazing record, but I think it's better than I initially thought it was. Definitely has moments and bright spots on it. So I have it at 3 stars.
Number 7 for me, and we're in 3-star territory too, is going to be Lenny. I will say this one has like questionable production throughout, and in a way is kind of like my topsy-turvy album, where I think there's some really good songs on here. It's an album of highs and lows, There's also some very generic stuff, a lot of filler. Really like the riff on Battlefield of Love. Love like the thick bass, thick like electric guitar sound, very futuristic. Not in love with the vocals on a lot of songs. This album has a lot of really cool guitar parts and solos. I'm shocked Joe doesn't find a lot of the guitar work interesting. You Were in My Heart has that really cool like bendy bite lick that comes in. The lyrics on Million Miles Away are pretty awful, objectively. By now I've learned this deep into Lenny to like not put too much stock into that. I think Dig In is great, really good single. My favorite song on here by far is Bank Robber Man, which I think is just a really cool like throwback old school rocker, kind of playful and fun, disgusting solo on it. Yeah, it's just kind of lacking something new for Lenny. Bit of a safe record with some really good tunes on it. So 3 stars.
My number 6. Are we on number 6? I guess we're on number 6. Raise Vibrations, my number 6. I don't really know why. Low, I thought was a pretty good song. Got a nice rumbly bass. Perked my ears up. I think this whole album, I don't know, there's something about his later stuff that, other than Strut, doesn't annoy me too much. Even though it's kind of all the same. Johnny Cash, like you guys mentioned, lyrics ludicrous, but you can almost hear like some steel lap guitar in there, some acoustic guitar, some kind of out of his normal wheelhouse. So that was like, okay, maybe he's trying some stuff on here. I like 5 More Days Till Summer, a little overproduced maybe. You got some strings and like castanets and stuff, but it's super catchy. It's a really nice wah guitar solo. One of the few times I noticed his guitar playing, or maybe it's what's his face, Craig Ross. I don't really know who plays on it as far as the solo, but I noticed it, so that's a plus for Lenny. Like most of his albums, lyrics not great, lack of tempo, too many slow jams, and not a lot of growth. Like at some point, I was just hoping for like an album where he kind of veers off in a different direction. He never does that. It's all kind of the same sounds you've heard. But I think this one is pleasant enough. It would probably be, in the bottom 10 albums I listened to in 2018, but better than a lot of his other stuff. So 3 stars for Raise Vibration.
3 stars would be in the bottom 10?
Oh, yeah.
My number 6 is Circus, which I think is a bit of a misstep for him. The songwriting is not that great, not that memorable. It was a dark period in his career. He was getting a little unhappy with the music business. His mother was sick. But yeah, he wasn't able to channel that into like a creative statement of any kind. It's just kind of forgettable. But I think a big thing for me with Lenny Kravitz is the way his records sound. I think he's masterful in the studio. Mama Said and Are You Gonna Go My Way, I think are incredible sounding records. And you can say what you want about the growth of the songwriting and the playing and all that stuff, but I can listen to them and marvel at how good they sound. And I think Circus is probably not as good sounding as those records, but it's still got that type of production that I like a lot. And I would rather listen to that than anything he did in the back half of his career. So even though the songs on this record aren't great, just the sound of it automatically lifts it above everything else I've talked about, puts it at number 6. I think Can't Get You Off My Mind is the one track on here that I think is a bit of a highlight, kind of his first little dip into kind of like a country ballad. I think it works. 3 stars overall for this.
All right, my number 6 is gonna be 5, and I'm up to 3.5 stars now. I think it's a really good record. It was kind of his big modern pop record at the time. I really remember Fly Away just being everywhere, and American Woman, which I'm not too crazy about. I don't even really like the original version all that much either. It's just one of those like classic rock tunes that never really did anything for me. I think that a lot of people kind of started to abandon him here because they didn't like that modulation he really started doing on his voice. And I'm sure there's like some trope or meme where he's going, yeah, 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 or whatever at the end of Fly Away, but it is what it is. I think it's a pretty good record. Like Jason was saying, I almost like listening to Lenny Kravitz more than the scores that I like give him, because the albums always sound good. And I always appreciate, even though I've already said that, I feel like he does that slow jam a lot. It always kind of sounds different. Every song to song on his albums always sound different. Like they're always in kind of like different keys and take on different, momentums and different, patterns. When you start listening to albums that kind of just sound the same, like they have a few ideas and they do it just a bunch of different ways on the album, at least his songs are very different from one another. Like the first 20 seconds never sound like the 20 seconds of the song before it, and vice versa. Love the horns right off the bat on Live. I think I Belong to You is cool. Black Velveteen kind of gets you into like new territory with a little bit of the sound and production, which is really cool. If You Can't Say No kind of rules. Yeah, this album got pretty bad reviews, and I don't really understand that. Always Fly Away just always reminds me of like the summer of '98. I'm sure there was some sick ass baseball highlight reel of Sosa and McGuire just launching balls to this song. Straight Cold Player, nice like James Brownie kind of feel to it. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good pop rock record, better than most rock albums that would have been represented via the singles on the radio in '98. Like if you plucked rock singles from '98, the albums that they were off, probably not very good. But this one is pretty good. 3.5 stars for me.
Well, it did come out in 1998, so I think just by that facet that it's not terrible and it's in 1998 elevates it greatly, because of course all the rock that year was just god awful. So maybe that's why. I was also a little surprised about the reviews on that one. That his discography, the reviews are so all over the place, and I have no idea why. Like why you would hate Baptism, say, but really like Black and White America has pretty good reviews. It's very odd. Like Strut has legitimately on Metacritic good reviews. Like it's a 71 out of 100, which would make it like his second or third highest rated. No idea why. It doesn't matter. Critics are dumb. Speaking of, my number 5 is going to be Baptism, which critics absolutely hated. Put this next to like Strut or Raise Vibration. It's not, more than marginally better or worse. Like we're talking about like real thin half stars for me at this point. I have it at 3 stars, so I don't like it that much, but a couple good singles on this one. Where Are We Running, California, Lady, all, catchy. Wouldn't turn them off if I heard them on the radio. Other than that, I don't know if there's a lot to really look forward to when listening to an album like this. System Mama Lover is just so Prince, like it's just trying so hard to be Prince. And the energy on Calling All Angels, it's so slow. Like I honestly expect like the band just like fall over. Like it's so exaggeratedly like slow motion. It's really weird to listen to. I made a point about that. I don't know. It's just one of the slowest, like most. Flash is a pretty good rocker, though. I liked Flash, despite the terrible lyrics. And I'm with you on the whiny vocals of I Don't Want to Be a Star. That was immediate turn off. Like as soon as I heard that, I was like, come on, man. Like you should be grown up, like at this point in your career. Give me something. But the decent singles, there's some okay stuff on here. I have it 3 stars. Probably can't say this about any other of his albums, but it's not as bad as the critics thought it was.
All right. My number 5, and I think these top 5 are all pretty solid. I have Lenny, which I think is very underrated, but in a way it was kind of the beginning of the end for him. I think this is where I think he starts to like kind of loosen his grip on sticking so much to like capturing vintage sounds. I mean, he's still working in the same territory. It's all very retro and he's referencing the past a lot, but I think a lot of the production here is more modern. It works on this record, I think, because the songwriting is better. I think at least melodically, there's hooks on all the tracks, I think. I think it's fairly engaging record, song for song. But going forward from here on, a record like Baptism, the less vintage sounding production doesn't work as well because the songs aren't as good. So I think, it's always a balance with him between like the songs and the sound of the production, and can one save the other at any given point? Rarely does he get both working at the same time. But for me, the songs here are good enough that they can stand on their own with some. I mean, the production on this record is not bad, but it's not the star of the show like it is on some of his early records. I like If I Could Fall in Love. I think Stillness of Heart and Dig In are some of his last really great songs. Believe in Me is cool, and Bank Robber Man, like Kram said, is a pretty fun track. So I got this at a pretty strong 3.5.
All right, my number 5. And this one tops a lot of people's lists, but I've got a number 5 at 3.5. I've got the debut Let Love Rule. Love the style here. It is unlike anything at this point. It's like a singer-songwriter, really raw approach, but has all of these more, funky kind of influences on it. My biggest problem with it is just like it identifies what Lenny's all about, which, like we said before, can be kind of cheesy at times with the whole like I'm here to solve the world's problems through love kind of feel. And this one, it works at times. Sometimes it feels a little half-heartedly, and I think it always feels kind of naive. I think this album kind of suffers from the songs being better on their own than the whole album feel. I'm not crazy about the way it's sequenced, but I do just love the style on it. I love the sort of noise and Freedom Train. Love the like just warm acid trip feel funneled through funky singer-songwriting throughout. There's a great piano solo in My Precious Love, but like I'll Build This Garden, nice message, really bad lyrics. Fear is okay. Again, I don't love his singing on this album, but again, the style just elevates this and the uniqueness of it. I think there's some great bass throughout this. My favorite song, well, one of my favorite songs is actually one of the bonus tracks on Flower Child, really cool. But yeah, I think it's a really good debut that he grows on, immediately after this. Yeah, it's just because it's more of like a singer-songwriter album, it puts a little bit too much focus on some of his flaws, but it's still really good. 3.5 stars for Let Love Rule.
Hey, you guys trashed this album, but I didn't mind it. I got Black and White America. His influence is what he's sort of, I don't want to say like ripping off, but like the very strong influence of Sly and the Family Stone, and a little bit more of the 70s like black music sound, and a little less like the Beatles, kind of the hippy-dippy psychedelia stuff. I think only improves his songs. Album's too long, yes, 16 tracks. No reason for that. It definitely droops in the middle. But I really like Push. I think Black and White America's pretty good. I mean, lyrically, they're not great, but I'll take his sort of stabs at social consciousness over his kind of unsexy lover boy, awkward lyrics any day of the week. I think Super Love stands really good. Come On, Get It's not bad. Just, the funk is there. I feel the funk, and it's better than sort of the alterna rock that he had been dabbling in, whatever he was doing. I like this sound better. Still retro, but it's a little different retro. Really great bass work throughout. And I don't mind the track with Drake on it. I don't think Drake adds anything to it, but I think the track itself isn't bad. I think all in all, it's a decent album. I'm still at 3 stars because it's way too long, and that's, I would cut half of it. And I think maybe I can have a 3.5, close to 4 stars. But yeah, just too much filler, too much stuff where he's just kind of going through the motions, repeating himself. So 3 stars.
All right, my number 4 is Let Love Roll, debut album, 1989. Kram just talked about it. I think he has a really strong vision on this record. I think he has for it being his debut record, has a strong understanding of who he is as an artist. I think some of the tunes are good. Let Love Roll, the title track's really good. I like My Precious Love. I Build This Garden for Us is really Beatlesy, has those Beatle-esque strings on it. Does Anybody Out There Even Care is good. But I think there is on this record kind of a disparity between those good songs and the other songs. I think there's kind of a chasm there where the other songs aren't very good at all. And I also think just his ability as a songwriter and his ability in the studio aren't really up to what his vision for himself is. I don't think he's quite executing exactly what he wants this record to be. But I think the high points are pretty high, 3.5 stars for me. But I think immediately after this is when he really kind of comes into his own.
My number 4 is going to be Circus. I think this one is sort of like his simplest record in a way. I kind of agree what you were saying. Like, I don't know what he really has to say on this, but I just think a lot of the songs are pretty good. It's got a bit more of like a raw, stripped down sound to it. He's doing more of just the straight up rockers rather than, getting the funk in there and stuff. It's got kind of like Houses of the Holy and STP, kind of like sun-dried vibes to it. Definitely a little grittier at times. I'm with Jason. I think of these early records sound really good, but of the early ones, this one, the mix is a little bit flat. There's killer guitar and Beyond Seventh Sky. Can't Get You Off My Mind and Magdalene are just great examples of some of his best, just simple, well-written tunes. And the lyrics aren't even that bad. God Is Love has a really cool ghostly vibe to it. And then you get to Thin Ice and it's really refreshing. You get a little bit of funk and style back into the album. Yeah, I think it's pretty underrated. I've got it at 3.5. Not his best, but like just a good conventional rock album for the mid-90s. So 3.5, Circus, number 4.
Pretty depressing that we're up to 4 and we're still dabbling in the 3.5 mark. I don't know, Lenny, just not doing it for me. You guys at least like him a little bit more. I'm doing 3. I got 5. 3 stars for my number 3, 5. I think it helps that it's 1998, so that there's so little competition as far as the rock scene. It's basically like this and nu metal. I think I prefer nu metal, but this one's not bad. I remember hearing Fly Away 1,000 times like a day. Like it was so ubiquitous, just you could not escape it. It's a good song, but it's so repetitious that I never want to hear it again ever. So that doesn't help. There's some interesting stuff on here, like he's doing a little more electronic textures. There's some computer assisted grooves, trying to like create a new mood. So it's a different direction. I don't know if it's a great direction, but it's different at least. There's some funky stuff on here. Thinking of You has some great slap bass, some backup vocals, unabrasive guitars. Like it's almost sexy, like definitely sexier than most of the stuff he's capable of. Little Girl's Eyes has a nice slow burning groove. Like his vocals, I think are pretty good on this. Lyrically, again, terrible. Black Velveteen could have been a great song, very fun musically. Kind of reminds me of like Janelle Monáe stuff later, but lyrically it's just so awkward that it just kills it for me. I don't know, it's better than Circus, but it's still 3 stars. There's just not much here to really get me. American Woman, I hate, just absolutely hate. It's not actually on this. I think it was a bonus track added later. It's on the Austin Powers 2 soundtrack, I think, 1 or 2. I hate it, so that's a negative, but I'm not counting it on this one.
All right, my number 3 is also 5, but I like it a bit more than Joe. I think a lot of what he tries on this record works really well and is really cool. A lot of the R&B and electronic stuff he does, I actually love. I think there's a lot of great songs on here. I love the way it opens with Live, which I think really amazing, high energy opener. I love the hand claps and the horns on it. Super Soul Fighter, just straight up funk tune, which I think works. Then he slows it down with like some sparse R&B slow jams on I Belong to You. But like a lot of records in 1998, it's way too long, even without the 2 bonus tracks, just too much. And I think it'd be pretty easy to decide which tracks to cut with just all the rock songs, just get rid of them. Fly Away, Black Velveteen, which is okay, but it doesn't fit on the record, I don't think. And I'd get rid of You're My Flavor, maybe another one of the weaker R&B tracks, and you'd have a really good, concise, cohesive record of this cool R&B sound that he's come up with. I've got this at 4 stars actually, because I love a lot of it. His cover of American Woman, which isn't actually on the record, is total garbage. It's really terrible. And I like the original Guess Who version, but it's one of the worst covers ever. Yeah, other than that, I mean, this record has a lot of stuff I like on it, which maybe because I owned it, I did have it back in the day and I listened to it a lot. So this might have been the first one of his I bought, actually. I'm not sure, but
Your memories have betrayed you, Jason.
I listened to it this week.
All right. Top 3. My number 3 is going to be Strut. 4 stars. I love it. I think you guys are crazy. I'm with the critics and the people. It's great. I'm with Rolling Stone. Jason did touch on some things that are true, that the first 2 songs are the best songs. And there are 2 of the best songs in his catalog. But I don't think it falls off a cliff that quickly. I would say the second half isn't nearly as good as the first, but Sex, The Chamber, Dirty White Boots, I think New York City's really good. Pleasure and the Pain is good. Strut, Frankenstein is not good. And Happy Birthday is really weird. But I like everything else. I like the way it concludes at the end with like more of like a slower kind of just like conclusion to this big dancey celebratory album. Bass on this album is just gross all the way through. It's just shot with like intensity and electricity, and it feels like he's just having fun on this album. Like there's some disco beats, it's catchy, it's hooky. Easily to me his best sounding album. I think the production and arrangements are just fantastic. You know, he is strutting on this. He's just acting kind of superficial and fun, even though I think one of his better pieces of lyrical writing is on his like love letter song to New York City. But then he also gets really childish with like She's a Beast, which kind of sounds like it's a Black Crow song written by like a college frat boy. It's pretty cool. I just think it's got a ton of really good energy and a great batch of songs, especially the first 6 or 7. Yeah, it's really good. 4 stars. Number 3, Strut.
It's gonna be tough to follow that one. I will attempt. My number 2, the debut, Let Love In. I'm rocketing up to 3.5 stars with this bad boy, because at least it's interesting. It was the first one I heard, and I wasn't tired of all his crap like I was on most of the rest of the discography. Like it sounds fresh and new, and it probably sounded even better in '89 because there really wasn't anything like this. Like there is some Sign of the Times on here for sure. There's some Prince, but well, I take that back because it pretty much is a lot like Prince. Because Prince brought in the Beatles and the psychedelia and stuff. So who am I kidding? It's a very Prince debut. He plays all the instruments. It's catchy. Not a lot of snarl. Not a lot of like powerful guitar or anything. Very moody. Very sort of hippie kind of his style. The love. It's all about the love. I could use a little more sex. Honestly, I think he doesn't quite bring enough of that. A little sterile sometimes, but the songs I think are good. They're very catchy. My Precious Love, one of my favorite tracks of his. Love the organs, the piano. A lot of great funky bass lines on here. Some cool piano. You know, it's a good album. I think if anyone in '89 heard this, they'd be like, all right, this guy, he's going straight to the top. Because as soon as he gets past his first, awkward album, he's going to be a total star. And somewhat that happened, but I just don't think he ever got close to fulfilling like the promise that the first couple albums, made him out to be. He never grew out of that. And I think it's a good album. It could be better, but for a debut, for playing all of the instruments yourself, for writing all the songs yourself, pretty impressive. So I'll give Lenny some credit for that. So my number 2, Let Love Rule, 3.5 stars.
All right, so my top 2, I think I can almost think of them as like 2 discs of the same double album because they're very similar in sound. The songwriting's similar, and I think they're both great. So, but at number 2, I'm going with Mama Said from 1991. And I think this is where he really first fully realizes his sort of blending of Motown, 70s R&B and funk and classic rock. I think both of these records are very underrated. And in doing this channel, I have come to realize that the way a record sounds is way more important to me than it is to most people. But I think both of these records are just like ear candy for me. So the songs could be absolutely nothing at all, and I could still enjoy listening to them. But I do think the songwriting here is good as also. I mean, it's not groundbreaking or anything that you haven't heard before, but I think they're solidly crafted songs. Something like Stand by My Woman. It's almost something that could have come out of like the Motown hit machine or the Brill Building or something like that. They're just really, really well written. The other thing about these two records is that I think his vocals are on another level that he never kind of replicated. I think his singing on these two records is outstanding. But yeah, so many good songs on here. Always on the Run is great. Got the Slash guitar solo on there. Stand by My Woman, I think sounds amazing. It Ain't Over Till It's Over is a killer R&B song with those kind of like silky, smooth strings. It's crazy to me that some of these songs didn't exist until the 90s. They're such like faithful reproductions of the sound of the 70s. He does kind of a Curtis Mayfield impression on What Goes Around Comes Around. I just think it's really well crafted stuff. If you're looking for something that's like new or like reinvent something, or you're not going to get it here, but I just think it's so well done. 4.5 stars for me on that one.
Thought we might have a trifecta there, but no. And my number 2 is going to be Are You Gonna Go My Way? Title track rules. I remember listening to it like when it came out when I was like 7 or 8 and thinking it was an older song than it was. Like I just assumed it was from like 1969 or whatever. It's got to be one of the all-time iconic riffs, and you can't really come up with too many iconic guitar riffs post 1993. It's just, the guitar riff kind of takes a back seat. I think Believe is really good. Yeah, Jason kind of hit the nail on the head with this album and with Mama Said. It's just some of just his best writing with the blend of the rock and the funk fusion and all of that. Just Be a Woman's really good. Black Girl's great. Sugar. I even like the reggae closer on this, getting like cool, strong Zeppelin vibes, especially on like the guitar playing on Is There Any Love on Your Heart? I'm kind of with Joe. I know people bring up Hendrix a lot with this style, but I don't always hear it. I hear other things usually more often. Jimmy Page probably more often than Hendrix. Bass sounds incredible here, really hitting big thuds just perfectly. Everything's mixed great. I think this one probably has his best batch of like some of the slower songs, really soulful. Yeah, I feel like these albums, he hit the nail on the head. And then later on, you kind of lose the soul because it's either not there on those later albums or it's just kind of rehashing old ideas. But this one's just a great blend of all those things. Almost the extra half star, but I'm keeping it at 4 for Are You Gonna Go My Way? It's my number 2.
Okay, well, Kramzer and I agree on our number 1s. It's clearly Mama Said. Clearly. I think on this, he takes the brand, he takes the sound he lovingly recreated on the first album, and just kind of adds to it. It's better songwriting, catchier. He brings in Slash for a couple of gritty guitar solos. I think that really works because his guitar solos are very not dangerous. They're very sort of, by the numbers, wrote, kind of boring. Slash adds a little extra to it that Lenny's incapable of doing himself, but it keeps the grooves, the funkiness, something like Always on the Run, great guitar solo again from Slash. You have It Ain't Over Till It's Over, which is a great song, funky little bass line, really great singing, and the electric piano and orchestration, it's almost like a Smokey Robinson kind of update, which obviously I'm going to love because that's, one of my favorite singers, one of my favorite styles. A little more of that would have been nice. He kind of gets away from that too much, but like Stand By My Woman, total like doo-wop kind of, reinvention, stuff that Bruno Mars would later just basically, I heard a lot of stuff that he pretty much just stole, updated for the 2010s, but everything that he kind of did Lenny did first, kind of on this album, I think. And it goes away from sort of the overt Prince influences. It's a little more him, I think. Not that it's a completely new creation or anything, but I hear more Lenny, less kind of plucking from Prince, basically, which is my big sort of negatives about his debut. But, you know, he's a great singer. He's a great instrumentalist. Like, he knows how to play the guitar. He knows how to play the bass. He knows how to play the drums. Like, he's very good at that. But I think this is the only album he does where he kind of puts it all together, where his lyrics aren't quite as dippy, where his influences aren't like totally on his sleeve. So unfortunately, after this, he gets rid of all the things he learned and goes to the lame, are you going to go my way? But it's a shame because he really had some promise on this, and it sounds great. Not that much bad things to say. I didn't want to give him a 4-star album, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to give him 4 stars for this one. Mama Said, pretty good. I'll hand it to you, Lenny. You got it right once.
All right, my number 1 is Are You Gonna Go My Way? But it's neck and neck with Mama Said. Also 4.5 stars, but both of these are very strong 4.5 stars. They're like right on the door, 5 stars. I think they're both great. Like I said, I kind of think of them as like companion records almost. So a lot of what I said about Mama Said applies to this one. I just like the songs on this one slightly better. I think the opening riff of Are You Gonna Go My Way is classic. There's some awesome bass on it. I had to learn it once for a band that I was playing in, and it is not easy. And there's parts in that song that are kind of like easy to get lost in because I suspect they left in some mistakes. So it's kind of weird. There's like this roughness to it that it's hard to follow, but it's cool. It's cool that they did that if in fact it was a mistake. Believe is an incredible ballad. I love the chorus. I don't know what Joe's talking about. Come On and Love Me. Nasty groove on that one. The drums sound awesome. Heaven Help is great, classic type of songwriting. Love the double track vocals on that song. Is There Any Love in Your Heart is really cool. Kind of reminds me of like She Said, or Andrew Bird Can Sing, these kind of like Beatles, psychedelic rockers. There's a cool guitar solo as well in that song. I will say the use of effects on these 2 records are so masterful. The delays on some of the drums, the phasers and like the EQs they use on his voice sometimes. It's the kind of thing where like you can easily obliterate a mix of a record and just go totally too far. And hearing how much of it they use on all of these songs, it's surprising no one like told them to pull it back a little, but it works so well. It absolutely nails the sound they're going after. I love listening to it. I think it's amazing. 4.5.
Very nice. Glad you mentioned some of the drumming. Even though it's always impressive that he's drumming, I would say on that album and on Strut, the drumming really captures me. My number 1 is going to be Mama Said. I'm with Joe. I'm at 4.5 stars. Fields of Joy is a great opener. You know, these are just really good songs all the way through. The lyrics don't get in the way of anything. Filthy solos on Field of Joy, Always on the Run with Slash. Stand by Woman, like you guys said, is a great ballad. Ain't Over Till It's Over. String arrangement, funk. I love the organ on More Than Anything in the World. Really sensual, cool vibe to the track. And I think his voice, like you guys said, his singing on this sounds really good, especially in some of the tracks where it's like backed up a little bit. I don't really have too much more to add. What Goes Around Comes Around has a really cool like bossa nova feel to it. Like Joe said, the influences are on his sleeve, but he's not like, but it's still like it's Lenny's arm for sure. Like it's very much not even close to copycat, but you know what he listens to. And I always kind of admire that when an album comes across that way. 4.5 stars. I think it's great. Mama Said, it is kind of sad that like I like Jason think these albums just sound great and are such a different brand of rock music than everything else in the early 90s, which is what makes it really cool. And yeah, like Joe was saying, like after that, like it was like, oh my God, this guy is possible, just like reimagining of late 60s, early 70s guitar rock god status with this formula. Did he live up to it? Joe would say no. Joe did not go Lenny's way. He decided not to go. But yeah, so we've got 2 wins for Mama Said and 1 for Are You Gonna Go My Way? What are your closing thoughts here on Lenny Kravitz, guys?
I think my biggest takeaway from Lenny is that he's an extremely underrated bass player and an extremely overrated guitar player.
Most of what people think about Lenny Kravitz is probably true. But I think the early 90s records are better than people probably give him credit for. But outside of that, yeah, the stuff that came after, pretty derivative songwriting, especially in the lyrics, not great. But yeah, those for 2 albums, he was about as good as it got.
I will say I like these albums better during Album of the Year than I did listening to them all back to back. They probably fell a half star each just because there's just not enough interest and variety in his sound and his influences. I think if you listen to one of these albums like in 91, where it really was sort of a different sound, and even in 98 when you had all this crap and new metal and stuff, and him with 5, I think it stands out as being pretty good for that time period. But off back to back altogether, it was probably my least favorite listography experience so far.
Wow, which is surprising because like you love all of those prints and all of those elements that get into his big blendedness. But I think for me, obviously a handful of these scored really well with 3.5 and up. He's not a top 100 artist for me. If he had 4 or 5 more records like Are You Gonna Go My Way and Mama Said, he absolutely would be. I'd love to see him live. I think the thing that kind of elevates him in my mind more than like my scores for this is just think his style is really unique. I'm not talking about his clothing style, which we will get to in a few days, but there's not really anyone else that quite has this. Like, who are Lenny Kravitz contemporaries that also sound like Lenny Kravitz? It's not really many to say. We did a grunge video where you can list people that kind of sound like each other, or Lenny just kind of stands out. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this, doing it more than Joe did. Do you like the earlier stuff? Do you like the later stuff? What are your overall impressions? Drop your lists in the comments below. But yeah, let us know what you guys think about Lenny. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Check out our top 10 favorite Lenny Kravitz songs tomorrow, and then a fun side 3 on Thursday. And we will see you next time here on Listography. Bye-bye.